All right, in this lesson we're going to do a walk cycle. So I've downloaded a character from animationstudios.com, and it's this Conan character, and I'll put the link in the description of the video for that. And I'm also using a reference image of a walk cycle that I will post the link to that as well. All right, let's jump into Maya and let's open up that Conan character. So when he comes in, it looks like this. So let's look at the key poses that we need to do for our walk cycle. So we have a contact position. So these are like the main key poses. Then we have the opposite of that. Then in between that we have the passing pose. And then we have these in-betweens. With those, we have this down pose and the up pose. So first, let's make this contact pose where his right foot is going to be forward and his right arm's going to be backward. And his body's going to be leaning forward slightly. So let's go into Maya, and we're going to set our walk cycle for 30 frames. So let's go in there and set that up. So on our time slider, let's set our frame range from 0. Right now, mine's at 100. I'm going to set that to 30. And I'm going to set this max range to 30 as well. Cool, so on this first frame, we want to go ahead and set that contact pose. So let's take his pelvis, and we're just going to move it down slightly and rotate it forward. So again, I'm selecting these arrow controls here. Going to rotate that forward a little bit, and we want his right foot to be forward, so I'm going to grab his foot control. That's this trapezoid looking shape around his foot. Grab my move tool, which is the W key, and just kind of drag that forward a little bit, but his leg starts to kind of lock out. But we could make his heel contact the ground. On his foot control, there's this attribute called roll. If we click that and middle mouse drag, we could set that to a negative value. And we want to do the opposite for his left foot, so we'll grab his left foot control, drag that backwards, and he already has a cool little roll thing happening on his foot. We could accentuate that if we want with the roll, and just click that and then middle mouse drag and crank that up a little bit if we want to. But I think that looks fine. My roll is set to about 40. Maybe that's too much. Maybe like 35. And then we want his right arm to be back and his left arm to be forward, but let's relax his shoulders a little bit first. So the clavicle controls are these big yellow arch controls. So I'm just going to grab both of these guys at the same time. So hold down shift and select the other one. Grab the rotate tool by hitting E, and then rotate them down to kind of relax them a little bit. It looks a little bit too excited there, so let's relax his shoulder a little bit. Then we could grab our shoulder controls, which are these big circles around his shoulders. So I'm holding down shift, I'm selecting both of those, and I'm going to bring those down. Then I could take his right shoulder control and rotate that back, and take the left one and rotate it forward. And then on that forward arm, let's take the elbow and bend it a little bit. So we'll grab that elbow control, the circle around his elbow, and rotate that forward. Same thing with his wrist. We want to grab his wrist control, which is the big circle around that wristband, and rotate that forward a little bit. And on that back arm, the right arm, his elbow's locked out, which is good, and then we'll take that wrist control and just kind of bend it back a little bit. You know, this is definitely over-exaggerated. I think it's good to kind of start out over-exaggerated and then end up You could dial things back if you want, but we're just kind of going for like a big broad walk cycle for this guy. Maybe I'll take this left clavicle and rotate it in a little bit, and take the right clavicle and rotate it backwards a little tiny bit. He looks like the Neanderthal guy, or the Bigfoot. But cool, so now we need to set a keyframe on all these controls. So there's different ways you can select the controls. You could go up to show here and turn off all the polygons, so you only see the controls and just draw a big box around them. Or a more accurate way to do that, let me turn the polygons back on, is Maya has these selection sets, and whoever made this character set up a selection set with all the controls in it. So if I go to the outliner here and hit the plus sign next to sets, I see one that says control set, and I can right click on that and go select set members, and that selects everything that's in that set. So now I would I need to kind of orbit in my viewport again to kind of make this active, because I was in the outliner. Now I can hit the S key on my keyboard. That sets a keyframe on frame 0. And I apologize if, let me undo that keyframe real quick. Let's say you're on frame 10, just make sure you take that time slider and slide it to frame 0, because we want this keyframe to be on frame 0. So keyframe on frame 0, hit the S key, and then you'll notice we have this little red kind of tick here on the time slider, and then all of our channels for our controls turn red as well to show us that those are keyframed. So now we want this to be a loop, so we want the first frame to be the same as the last frame. So let's go to frame 30 and hit S as well to set a keyframe. And if you had clicked off for some reason and deselected all your controls, just go back into the outliner here and right click on that control set and select set members and set your keyframe. So let's go ahead and save our file. So let's just do control S. Now we need to do the opposite frame of this contact at frame 15. So let's take our time slider, go to frame 15, and we just want to make the opposite of this. So we can start out maybe with his clavicles here. We want to push this one back. I'm going to take this elbow and lock it out. So I'll grab the elbow control, and let's zero out that rotate Z value. And then we'll take that wrist and bend that backwards, and we'll take the shoulder and then rotate that backwards. Kind of want to match the other one. And then we'll rotate this right side clavicle forward. We'll take that right shoulder and rotate that forward. And the right elbow. And the right wrist as well. Alright, so now let's take our left foot, grab that left foot control, we're going to drag it forward. And he had that roll on there, so just need to take that roll and make it a negative roll, kind of matching the other foot slightly. We'll take the right foot and we'll drag it back, but this time we need to change that roll and make it positive, positive 35 or so. And that looks pretty good to me, so we'll go into our control set, we'll right click that, select set members, and hit S to set a keyframe. We'll save our scene, control S. And then now if I hit play, we should see this kind of swimmy motion happening. Now, if yours is playing too fast, you want to go into your preferences. So there's this little guy with a gear here. You want to click that, and you want to go under settings, time slider, and then under playback. Let's say if mine was play at every frame, and if I save it, you'll see what it might look like. It's just way too fast. So if I click that again, under settings, time slider, under playback, you want to change this to 25 frames per second times 1, and save, and that'll play in real time. That's the beginnings of a walk cycle. Now obviously we're missing 3 poses for each step, 3 in between. So let's go ahead and next we're going to create this passing pose where his legs kind of make this figure 4 and his arms are just at his side. So let's do that. Jump back into Maya. So we'll go to, let's say, frame 7. And we want that leg that's moving forward to come up in the air, that foot. So we're just going to grab this foot control of his left leg, and we're going to drag it up. And then we want to rotate it down, or backwards, or however you want to put that, like that. And maybe we'll move it forward just a little bit, so we kind of get that like number 4. It's kind of hard to see those giant hands in the way, but kind of like that. Let's also check the hand position on those keys. So we want the arms are probably pretty good as they are, and we want his height to be slightly raised than it was. So let's go back to Maya, and we'll grab those arrows that are around his pelvis, and we'll drag his pelvis up a little bit, maybe almost locking out that right leg. And let's right click on that control set, select set members, hit S to set a keyframe, and then we want to do the same thing at like frame 22. So in frame 22, his right leg is moving forward, so we're going to grab that right leg, move it up in the air, maybe we'll translate it forward a little bit, and we'll rotate it down. Oops, and just, I'm rotating on one axis when I do this. And we'll move up his pelvis a little bit. So grab that arrow around his pelvis, we'll hit our move tool, and drag this up a little bit. And then again, we have to right click on that control set, select set members, and hit S to set the keyframe. So now let's save our scene, Control S, and then let's hit play and see where we're at. Getting a little bit better, but still pretty robotic. Alright, so now we need to go back and set our down and our up positions. So for these, we just really want to probably move the pelvis lower in the down and then higher in the up position. So let's go back to Maya. Let's, kind of find the middle here and go to frame 3, and we will grab his pelvis control and we'll just push this down about that far. Both knees are bent, and we will right click on the control set and select set members, and we'll set a keyframe. Now I'm setting a keyframe on all the controls even though we just moved one, because if you forget to set a keyframe and later we want to move, adjust something, maybe adjust his arm in this down pose, then if there weren't keys on that arm in the other poses, you might get some weird movement. So I like to kind of set keys on everything, on all the major keyframes, and then if we need to offset keyframes later on, we could do that individually for each control. So now we need to go to like frame 11, which is halfway between 7 and 15, and we're going to raise his pelvis up in the air as high as we can. And we might want to raise it up even when his foot comes off the ground. We can just add some roll into that foot. So select that foot control, set your roll a little higher, and we could grab that pelvis and move it up even higher. So then we could, again, right click on that control set, select set members, hit S to set a keyframe, and let's save our scene, control S, and we'll do the same thing on frame 18. We need to push that pelvis down, and we'll right click, select set members on control set, set a keyframe, then go to frame, let's say 26, and we'll pull his pelvis up in the air. That foot comes off the ground a little bit. We'll just grab that foot and increase the roll, and then we'll pull his pelvis up even a little bit higher, and we will right click on control set, select set members, and set a keyframe. Now, one thing I didn't do on that down and up pose was set the arms, so let's take a look. We actually want those arms to be a little bit wider on the down, and I think the up is probably okay, but let's adjust that down pose. So I'll go to frame 3, and I'll take my right shoulder, and kind of rotate it back a little further, and my left shoulder, rotate that forward a little bit more. And then right click on control set, select set members, set that keyframe, then we'll do the same thing on frame 18. We'll rotate that right arm or left arm back a little more, and then the right arm will rotate that forward a little bit more. And right click on control set, select set members, hit S to set keyframe. All right, cool. So let's save our scene and see where we're at. So here's our basic walk cycle. There's a little bit of a hiccup because we're playing frame 30 and frame 1. Maybe if you put this at 29, this last frame here, we shouldn't see that hiccup. There we go. So this is your intro to character animation. Maybe we could add some twist to his upper body. So let's do that, and then we'll call it a day. So let's select like his chest control, this big circle around his chest. We'll go to frame 0, and we'll just kind of rotate it forward a little bit, and then let's put this back at frame 30 so we can see that last frame. And let's set a keyframe on that, and then if you middle mouse drag your time slider, it doesn't update the viewport, so we can maintain, because if I just drag it, the pose changes and we lose that rotation. So then let's middle mouse drag the time slider, and it doesn't update the pose, and then we can go to frame 30 and set a keyframe on that chest control. And there's already keys on the other keyframes, but in this case we actually don't want those, so let's delete those. So let's the way you delete keyframes is you can hold down shift and then click and highlight the keys you want to delete, and this is for that chest control, not all the controls. And I'm just going to right click on them and hit delete. So we have that twist here. Now we want to go to frame 15 and put the opposite twist in there. Set a keyframe. We'll go to frame 7. Let's just go ahead and play it and see what that looks like. I think that actually looks pretty good. And again, if I stop this and then change my frame range to 29 instead, that way we're not doubling up on that last and first key that gets played back. We get less of a hiccup there. One more thing I want to add is like a little bit of a hip swing when he changes his weight. So let's stop and rewind, and there's this control here that looks like an atom, kind of this yellow one. And if I rotate that, it kind of swings his hips a little bit. And so what we want to do is go to frame 0 and his weight. Actually, let's go to frame 3. I'm going to go like to that passing, actually 7. On this passing frame, we want his weight. His weight's pushing up through his hips, so we kind of want to tilt that a little bit like that, set a keyframe, and then go to frame 22, do the opposite. So now if we play it, it's got a little bit of some hip movement in there. It looks less robotic. If we want to, we could relax his hands a little bit because they look, wide open and stiff. So let's hit stop and go back to frame 0, and let's grab there's these little arches or arcs in front of his fingers. If you grab that and grab the other one, hold down shift and grab the other one, there's these curl attributes. You click and highlight them and middle mouse drag and kind of curl his hands into like little fish shapes. So we could just set a keyframe on frame 0 for that, and then just delete the other. Since his fingers aren't going to be moving, let's just delete the other and set this back to 30. So hold down shift, click and drag on all the other keyframes, and just right click and go delete. So we just have a keyframe on frame 0, but his fingers aren't moving much at all, so I think we don't need any other keyframes on those. Again, I'll set this back to 29. There's our little walk cycle, so I'm going to save my scene. And that is it. Feel free to post some comments if you have any questions.